I'm excited to talk to you today about a couple of topics that I'm really passionate about. First of all, I'm Trina Becker. I'm a professor at Eastern Illinois University. I'm a speech pathologist. I've been practicing as a speech pathologist for over 20 years. I teach AAC, Augmentative and Alternative Communication. That's one of my expertise areas. It's a class I've been teaching for probably 18 years now. And also embedded within that, I love the early intervention population. I love working with children with autism, and I love to do intervention for early language development, and play goes right along with that. So let's get started with the presentation. Let's first start by talking about what play looks like in children with autism. Many children with autism often have limited play skills. So this can look like playing with a few toys, so just having a few favorite things that they play with and not an expansive, toy box full of toys that they really love to engage in. Or they play maybe in a different way or repetitive way with some toys. So maybe not in the typical way that children would play with it. So they might, spin wheels or line things up or repetitively, press a button, something like that. And then why is play so important? So why are we even talking about it? Why do we care about play skills in children with autism? It's really important for their overall early cognitive and language skills. Children learn through play. And so this is an area that we need to specifically target in children with autism so that we're giving them multiple opportunities to learn language skills and play skills. And then that goes right along with cognition. It also assists in developing fine and gross motor skills. So those occupational therapists and PTs will, also encourage children to develop play and encourage the development of those skills through specific toys. And it encourages the foundation of some social skills. So for example, things like turn taking, taking turns with a toy, is the beginning stages of that social reciprocity and the conversational turn taking that individuals may have later in a conversation. So it sets those foundations for those early language skills, motor skills, cognitive skills, and social skills. There are different types of play, and this is just a general list of those. So types of play with objects includes things like exploratory play, and that's when children demonstrate interest in objects. So they pick it up, they look at it, they feel it. They're visually exploring that toy. So just checking things out. And like I said, feeling it, touching it, looking at it. And then we have play that's called cause and effect play. So in cause and effect play, they have to do something to make the toy do something. So they have to push down the button on a spin toy. They have to pull back, a car to make it go. They have to press the letter A for the toy to say A in the alphabet or to play sounds or music. So cause and effect. I have to do something to make something happen on that toy. And then we have toys and play that includes functional skills. So functional play is using toys in the way in which they were intended. So pushing a car, stacking rings on a ring stacker, using the kitchen set by putting things in the microwave and putting things in the refrigerator and stirring things in a bowl. So functional play, playing with toys in the way they were intended. And then we have constructive play. So we're going to use our blocks and we're going to use our Legos and we're going to stack them up and build and make things. And then finally, pretend play, where the child is using their imagination to do things. So we are playing with a farm set and we are imagining that the animals are eating. And so we're pretend play, the animals eating, or we're playing with toy figurines in a little toy house. And so we're making sure that the little baby in the family is going to bed or that we're making dinner in the kitchen. So anything pretend. So this is kind of a hierarchy of play skills, and it gives us kind of a framework for how we are going to think about teaching skills and what skills to teach our child. Next, forms of play. So we have different types of play, but now let's think about forms. And so we have isolated play. Our children with autism do a lot of isolated play where they're playing by themselves. They're not joining in play with others, or they're not including others in their play. And then we have parallel play. So you might see a child play alongside someone else, so alongside another child, alongside you, but there's really little interaction between the two. But you may see during that parallel play that they start to imitate some skills that the other person is doing. And generally they're in their space, right? So they're sitting next to them. They're playing with toys beside them, and they're doing that in a parallel way. And then at the highest level, we have interactive play. So playing with someone else by sharing or taking turns. And this is where we want to go. We want our children to engage in interactive play. It's great for learning skills. It's great for developing that social communication. And now let's talk about communication, since these two things go hand in hand. So communication skills in children with ASD. So we may have some children who are minimally verbal, meaning they use just a few words, and primarily they're relying on gestures or behavior or facial expressions to communicate. And sometimes this can be frustrating because it's often difficult to figure out what the child wants and how they are feeling, and they have difficulty relaying information to us. We have other children with autism that use words, but maybe they don't use them consistently, or they're not effective. So they're using jargon, which seems like they're just babbling. They're talking, but you're not making, quite good sense of it. They're using maybe some vocalizations, or maybe that speech is unintelligible. And during that jargon, you might hear them use some intonation patterns that are appropriate. So it sounds like they're, saying true words and talking, but again, you're not understanding what they're saying necessarily. Or they're using words, but they don't use them regularly or at meaningful times. So I've heard lots of parents say, I've heard them say this word before, but I can't get them to do it again. Or they don't say that word when it's appropriate to say that word. It comes out, at bedtime, and we wanted them to say it earlier in the day. So they're not consistently using that word. And that can be frustrating too, because it's in there, they can say it, and why aren't they using it when they should? Why are they not using it meaningfully? Sometimes a child can use words, but they're often phrases from songs or videos or shows. And so again, they can say the words, they have the ability to produce the speech, but it's not being used in a functional way. Or they're repeating phrases over and over again. And this may indicate to us that the child might be a Gestalt language processor, and they're using some Gestalt phrases. So they have these phrases embedded in their mind. They're phrases that they can say, but sometimes we can't figure out the meaning of them, right? Or Gestalt language processors learn in chunks. They learn in whole phrases, and they're not learning language in individual words where they can combine individual words in different ways to say things. So we just need to be aware of that. And so I'm primarily talking about the children, obviously, today that are delayed in those communication skills, that have difficulty being able to communicate effectively their wants and needs, or to be able to answer questions. So just like play, now we're going to go through early communication skills that we want to see our children developing. So we have those pre-linguistic or foundational language skills, and these are skills important for a child to develop before they start producing words. So we want them to have joint attention and joint interaction. And joint attention means that they're looking at, or they're engaging in the same thing that we're talking about as their communication partner. Being able to have that joint attention to something helps them learn about it, right? So if we're talking about a specific toy and we're sharing information about them, we want the child to be attending to that toy. We want them to be looking at that toy so that they know what we're talking about, and they are establishing the meaning with the words we're saying with the toy that's in front of them. We want them to respond to cues. We want them to respond to their name. We want them to respond to things like look, or even no. And that's an early communication skill. That's a foundational receptive language skill. We want a child to know the cause and effect of communication. So I talked about cause and effect with toys before, but this is specific to communication. But they understand that when they do something, so when they make a vocalization, when they touch a picture symbol, if they're an AAC communicator, or if they use a specific word, that something's going to happen. That communication is power, that the communication they have has meaning and something will result as in response to what they're saying or what they're telling you. Another early communication skill is imitation. So imitation of speech. We're also going to talk about imitation of play today, and then turn taking. And then early language skills. We want a child to be able to make choices and requests. They want them to be able to tell us what they want. We also want them to be able to tell us what they don't want. So we want to give them ways that they can appropriately protest, say no, or say don't want. And we want them to do that with words or picture symbols so that they're not using behaviors. Greetings and farewells, hi and bye. Those are important early communication skills as well. We start working on that as early as 6 months in an infant, where we're teaching them to wave hi and bye-bye. And those are important social words and social gestures that we use many times a day. And then comments. So reacting to a situation, expressing their feelings. So saying things like, I like this is fun, yay, uh-oh, those kind of things. And then further along in development, we want a child to be able to answer questions, and we want them to also be able to ask us questions that will allow for them to participate in an educational setting and help them with information transfer. So the development of play and communication go hand in hand. So it's the chicken and the egg concept, right? They're developing alongside each other when the child is in these early stages of development. So we can talk about that in typical development, as little ones are engaging with toys to learn, and they're developing those communication skills at the same time. But that can happen at any age. So even though you might have a child who's delayed, we can still work on those early communication skills and those important play skills, when they're at the preschool age, or maybe even a little bit older. And we want the child to learn them in a natural environment if we can. So natural environment is always the best environment. So teaching language and play in the home is that preferred setting, or in the classroom. If they're in the preschool classroom, we want the child using familiar toys. Or we want to be able to introduce new toys in a familiar setting, so it increases them being comfortable with introducing something new. Teaching in a natural environment, encouraging communication and play in the home really helps also emphasize the function of language. We're not teaching them in an isolated therapy room. We're teaching them where they're going to be playing the majority of the time. We're teaching them where they're going to be using those communication skills the majority of the time: the classroom, the home, outside of the home, in settings like the grocery store, the park, etc. Doing this promotes generalization, right? It helps the child see the importance of the skills and how functional that they are, and encourages them also to become spontaneous eventually with these early skills. So let's talk about developing play. So developing play skills. So many children with autism, like we talked about, are going to have their preferred toys. And they are likely not going to want you to be a big part of that play interaction. And so it's important for us to start to try to join into play with our child. So we want to start by doing that parallel play with them. So we're going to play beside them, not yet trying to insert ourselves into that play situation, but what we should do is start by imitating what they do. So if you are doing some parallel play and the child is playing with cars and lining them up, you're going to line up the cars just like the child is lining up the cars. If they have a sensory noodle and they're using that for sensory stim and they're playing with it, you are going to do the same thing. So you need to get a sensory noodle and you need to play in the same way that the child is playing. We need to first start, again, by imitating what they do. Let them get comfortable with you being in their space. Also, seeing you do what they do is going to transition to more imitation, later, right? So you start by imitating them, and they're going to learn that imitation is the appropriate thing to do, and they're going to start imitating as well. So next, after we join in to play with them for a while, or I'm sorry, do parallel play with them for a while, and we're imitating what they do, we see that they're getting more comfortable with us in their space. We're going to start to try to introduce new actions with the toys that they're currently using. So if it's cars that they're lining up, now we're going to take a turn and we're going to push the car, or we're going to introduce a ramp that we're going to put one of the cars on and make that car go down. So we're right now at this stage taking their preferred play activities and doing new things with it. Okay, and we want to encourage them to imitate now what we're doing. Again, we were imitating what they were doing to start with. Now we want to encourage them to do what we do. So we're going to introduce new actions like pushing vehicles, or maybe building things, putting items in containers, maybe even doing some pretend play. So maybe we're going to take that sensory noodle, and we're going to pretend that it's food, and we're going to feed it to a stuffed animal. Or we're going to take that sensory noodle and we're going to put it inside the microwave in the kitchen set. So integrating new things to do, or maybe even more appropriate things to do with a toy that they're currently using. So this may take some thought, like, okay, how can I take what they are really interested in, what they love to do, and get them to do it in a more appropriate way. So you may have to spend some time thinking about this, prior to doing that with your child. And then the next thing you should do is to start to introduce those new toys within the activity. So now I'm going to engage in cars, and with the cars, I'm going to start to maybe introduce blocks. So as the child is learning to drive the car, we're going to start by driving around the blocks, or we're going to make a bridge, and the child is we're going to imitate, or we're going to model taking the car over the bridge or over the bumpy road or driving on the block. So whatever it is, we're going to introduce a new toy, but it's going to be within that comfortable activity for them. We don't want to change too many things all at once. So this might take some time for them to adjust to the new toy. They may start by pushing those blocks away when you're playing with the cars. They don't want anything to do with them. But I would encourage you not to be discouraged. If they ignore it for a while, if they start to push it away for a short period of time, keep doing it, right, until they get more comfortable. We know sometimes that children with autism, it takes them a while to get used to something new. So we're going to start slowly. We're going to put it in their space. We're going to start to use it a little bit. If they push it away, that's fine for that day, but we're going to try again the next day. Again, we want to use that new toy with their favorite toy. And we want to allow time for that child to explore it before playing with it. So that can be a way that we're slowly introducing it. And then eventually we hope to fade that. We hope to fade their favorite toy. So now we're introducing blocks, but we're not playing with the cars with the blocks. We're just playing with blocks on their own. So it's really important to introduce these new toys. We don't want the child to become so locked into their favorite things that they don't do anything else but play with 3 or 4 items. And the reason this is so important is because the more they're interested in, the more they play with, the more language we can expose them to. So the more things we can talk about and the more skills that we can develop. If we allow a child to continue to play with the same 3 things over and over and over again, there's only so many words that we can introduce them to during that. There's only so many skills, play skills that we can do with that one thing. So we need to start thinking about, it's really important to introduce them to new things over time, because this will help them develop more language and will help them develop more skills. So I really, in my own therapy with kids here in our clinic, or when I'm supervising our graduate students, really emphasize how important this is. And I think back on my career when I first started, I tended to stick to the same things that the child was interested in, because I knew that they were going to be motivated by it, right? So I knew we could get them engaging during that activity. Knew I could make them happy if we continued to play with that during therapy. But eventually you're going to run out of things to do with it. Or eventually, they're going to get bored with it, right? Eventually you're going to run out of words to be able to expose them to during that activity. So it's important early on to start to think about, okay, I've got to start introducing these new activities for the child. I'm going to go on because I'm going to probably say things that I have later planned in the session here. One of the things that we see a lot with children with autism too is that they love those cause and effect toys. I had a child come in for an evaluation earlier this semester, and he brought in a variety of toys. His mom did, and they were all cause and effect. Those were his favorite things. So he had like a push and spin toy. He had a sensory light up toy that he pushed and it would turn on and light up. He had some of those like educational toys, like the little leapfrog games where you'd press the button and they would say the colors, or they would name the animals, or like they would name the alphabet or sing a song. Those are engaging toys for children, but you have to think about they don't allow for a lot of interaction, right? You can take turns and you can press the buttons, or you can push the spin toy or turn the light up toy on, but it's not a lot of back and forth. It doesn't require a lot of interaction with others. So we have to think about, if our goal is really to expand the play skills, we need to think about toys that the child can join in with you, that it can be shared play, that we start to get that interactive play going on. So blocks and Legos, cars and ramps that I've already talked about. Maybe it's a construction set. Love a good kitchen set with play food and dishes, that we can start to engage in some pretend play and some functional play with those. A house with furniture and people, a farm set with animals and tractors, and maybe even doing some books, or I hope that you're going to use some books, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. While we're thinking about what toys to introduce to them, we need to consider also those different types of play. So as we're encouraging these new toys, thinking about letting the child explore them so that they have that exploratory play experience. The cause and effect, we've already talked about that, but then functional and constructive and pretend play. How can you develop those play skills with those different toys? Something to keep in mind as you're planning out what you're going to do with them. But play doesn't always have to include physical toys. We need to think about play in terms of social routines. So for a very young child, you may be doing things like peekaboo. For an older child, it might be things like hide and seek or chase. How many of your children love to be chased around? They love to run, right? And so turning that into a game. Also, songs, rhymes, finger plays are so very important for early social skills, also for early language skills. And these are great for getting the child to jointly attend to you, to imitate some actions, and to get that overall interaction. So don't forget about those songs, rhymes, and finger plays. I feel like sometimes we kind of overlook those in today's age, and we tend to go to more of those toys that have all the buttons that we can press and the music. But don't forget about, a good itsy bitsy spider or a good happy and you know it, where you're getting that, one-on-one with the child, that social interaction, and that modeling of the gestures during the songs. Routines with sensory input can also be a part of play. So if your child loves to swing, if they love to be tickled, if they love to be spun around, whether that's you holding them or in a spinny chair, or pressure and squeeze, let's think about how we can make that into a routine. We can integrate that into play. Again, using their strengths, using their interests, and then expanding those to be able to develop more language skills. So routines, how are we going to do it? How are we going to teach them new play skills? How are we going to teach them new communication skills? Routines are absolutely the key. So when playing, you want to set up a play routine. Routines help the child know what to expect. And we know that a lot of children with autism love a good routine, right? And they get upset when the routine is changed. So let's use routines in a very positive way as we embed it into teaching. So again, teaching communication and teaching play. So repetition helps them learn, right? If they hear something over and over again, if they see something being done over and over again, they're more likely to start imitating and start doing that. So our routine should include the same actions with the toys, the same social or sensory routine over and over again. And we need to consider actions that the child can imitate. So what can they do with the toy? What could they do during that social or sensory activity? And then the next thing is to think about, okay, well, what are the words and phrases that I can start to embed in these routines that the child is hearing the same thing over and over again so that they know what words to use and when to use them during that activity. So I would encourage you to think about not just using nouns or labels of items, but to also think about incorporating actions. So those verbs and comments, fun, I like this, uh-oh. So when you're planning out that routine, you should be considering all these things. So in my routine, what are the actions that I'm going to do over and over again with this toy or these toys? And what are the words and phrases that I'm going to embed into this routine that I want my child to learn or are going to be functional and appropriate during that activity? And this may require some thinking ahead of time, right? As a speech pathologist, this is something that when I first started, I absolutely had to think about and plan about ahead of time. And now, after multiple years of experience, it's coming more naturally for sure to me that I can take a toy and, set a routine that very first time. But as you're first starting this is something that you're going to have to plan ahead. Okay, let me think about the toy that I want to introduce to my child next. So I'm going to take the kitchen set and I am going to embed their sensory noodle into that kitchen set toy. So I'm going to first start by playing with their sensory noodle the way they do. And then I'm going to play beside them. And next, I'm going to introduce maybe some of the kitchen set items. So I'm going to have the toy dishes and some toy food, and I'm going to play with that next to my child while they're playing with their sensory noodle. And eventually, then I'm going to take my sensory noodle and I'm going to start to put it in the bowl and I'm going to stir up the noodle and I'm going to pretend that it's food. I'm going to take that noodle and I'm going to feed it to the stuffed animal or the doll. So this is going to be my routine. We're going to take things, we're going to put it in a bowl, we're going to stir it up, we're going to give somebody a bite. That's my routine. Those are my actions. Now, what are the words that I'm going to use during that interaction? So we're going to put it in. We're going to put it in the bowl. Stir it up. Is that baby hungry? Let's feed the baby. That baby wants to eat. So again, thinking through what are those things? What are those words that I can use over and over again so that the next time when I play with this activity, I'm going to do the exact same thing. We're going to do this same play schema or routine with this kitchen set until the child starts to do it on their own. I've listed some vocabulary here to think about when you're considering words or phrases to introduce into your activities. This is absolutely not an all-inclusive list. I just have some general ideas here. So some functional words and phrases. Functional words include things like want and more, go, look, eat, drink, help, stop, all done. These functional words can be integrated into multiple play activities. They're not specific labels of things. They're very functionally based, so they can be done in multiple play activities, but also in your natural environment, when you're eating, when you're getting dressed, when the child's taking a bath, those kind of things. And then descriptors, so describing by in, on, off, big and little, talking about colors, talking about feelings, opening and closing, those basic concepts that you're introducing to your child. So you're thinking ahead to, man, these words are going to be important for them following directions. These words are going to be important in their academic setting as well. These words are also going to be important for them to be able to tell me specifically things that they want, if they can describe it. And then those feeling words, of course, are really important to introduce to your child so that they start to use them. So we know when they're upset or we know what's wrong. Don't forget about those social comments and phrases. I think these are really important for social connections with others. So words like ouch and the greetings hi and farewells bye, love you, want to play, can I have a turn? So teaching them how to approach a child or approach someone, to initiate a play interaction, communicating things like I want a break when they're overstimulated, talking about I like this or I don't like this, yum and yuck and fun and boring. And I would say to you that I would model comments that are positive, of course, but also think about the comments that they can use to express their feelings. They're not always going to be happy. They're not always going to like something. They're not always going to have fun. So modeling things like, ooh, yuck, or well, this is boring and you don't like that, do you? Right? So we're giving them those words to be able to express themselves so they don't have to always result by using behavior. One of the things that I wanted to mention during this talk too is to caution you about drilling labels or having your child name things. I think sometimes we get excited about it when a child can name all of these things and they do it in a very routine way. But if you're not embedding them into functional context, it doesn't mean that they really understand the meaning of the word. So for example, let's say your child loves a certain book and they can name the animals in the book, right? But can they do the same thing in a different book? Can they still name those animals if they look different? So maybe there are toys that look different than the way that the animals look in a book. We want to teach them the animal names in the book when they're see them on a video, when we see them in a picture, when we go to the zoo. So thinking about how to embed those labels into functional context and not always keep drilling them or to keep emphasizing those in that routine setting. So we want to make sure that they can do that. So again, they're generalizing that word so they really understand that meaning of the word. And we're not just teaching that rote skill. So again, embed the use of labels across multiple activities and environments. So if colors is something that they can do with, let's say, they can do them with maybe those magnetic alphabet letters. They can label the colors there. Well, now let's make sure they can label colors in a book. Let's make sure that they can label colors of clothing or colors of blocks. Let's embed those color words into functional phrases. Oh, you want the red gummy snack? Or let's get the blue car. Maybe we're embedding them also into choices. Do you want the red truck or do you want the blue truck? Do you want a green cup or do you want the yellow cup? So that we're broadening and generalizing that knowledge of those labels and establishing the meaning across environments. So next I have a couple of videos of a therapy session that we did with a little guy with autism. I'm hoping that the video will work. I didn't get to try it out ahead of time, but for him, he definitely had his preferred toys. So he loved watching videos. He's the one I feel like I use the sensory noodle because of him. He loved to engage in the sensory noodle and he loved, his mom said, to put things in. He was always finding things and putting it in containers. So those were his preferred ways that he liked to play. And so when we started therapy with him, I talked to the clinicians about making sure that we start to introduce new toys so that we can teach him more words, so that we can expose him to some of those also pre-linguistic and early developing language skills. So in our sessions, they developed their routine for some common toys. They developed the words or phrases that they were going to emphasize and the actions that they were going to do during the activity, because we wanted during this time to encourage this child to respond to cues. So things like look, and to respond to his name, We wanted the child to learn to imitate some different actions with toys during the activity. So we wanted to do it the same way over and over again. And we're working on things here to ultimately get to that imaginative play. So Shannon, if you could tell me if this is not working, that would be great. So I'm going to start it now and hopefully it works. Can you hear it? No. Okay. Let me stop share. I think what I need to do, or maybe it's on, oh no, there it is.
When you share too, sometimes if you hit the optimize button at the bottom, it helps.
Yeah, I just didn't do that the first time when I shared it. So we should be good now. Let's see.
Oh, look at the baby. Can you give the baby a hug? Are you being sweet to the baby? Here you go. Let's make some food. Are you hungry? Can you put the lettuce in? Put in. Yeah, I'm gonna hold the baby. Noah's gonna cook. Let's cook. We're gonna cook for the baby. The baby's hungry. Let's put the lettuce in the bowl. Put in. Put in. Let's stir it up. Ready? My turn. Noah's turn. Noah, try. Stir it up. Let's gesture. Stir it up. Yay! Good job. Ooh, is that yummy? Give some to the baby. Give some food to the baby. She wants some. Noah, look. Toy. Feed the baby.
So he is definitely doing exploratory play. He's checking out the different food items. He's also doing a little bit of stimming, I think, with shaking the lettuce and using that for some visual stim. So we're trying to really encourage that imitation, right? So we had a routine every time of we're putting food in the bowl, we're stirring it up, we're giving a bite to the baby. Over and over and over again. So we did this activity. He came twice a week for therapy. So we did this play activity for 3 weeks and then introduced a couple of new different toys and then came back to it a few weeks later, just because we also didn't want him to get bored doing the same thing over and over again in the therapy session.
Oh, look at the
Next, you're going to see him engage with the farm set. So I have a little video where you can see the routine that we're establishing with him. So he loved the farm set, but what he really loved about it is opening and closing the little doors at the top and opening the doors and closing the doors at the bottom. So that was his way of playing with the toys. So we're trying to get him to do different things. So you'll see the clinicians introduce, we're going to let the animals eat, we're going to put them in and take them out, go to sleep, those kind of things. And then I'll show you the next video in a minute where you can see that he does start to do some of that imitation of those play skills.
Noah, look at my animals. What? What? What is that? You want the cow? Or you want the piggy?
throw them. Here. Here, you like the cow. Put the cow in the barn.
Where'd the cow go? Where'd he go?
The cow's hungry.
That one came off earlier.
Oh well, it's okay. All right, we're gonna make the cow eat. Get the cow out.
That cow's hungry.
Get the cow out.
Can you feed that cow?
Does he want to take a nap first instead? Shut the doors. Open. Get the cow out. Here you go. Here. Make him eat.
So he's not super happy that we're interrupting his routine with open and close with the barn, but he's starting to get used to it, right? And he started to get used to it because we kept doing the same thing over and over again. He started to know what to expect, what we were going to do with the animals when we took him out of the barn. We weren't going to get rid of them, right? We were going to continue to play with them, but just play with them in a different way. So then again, after being exposed to that for a few weeks, you'll see here in this little clip, and this is the first time that he did it, so the clinicians get excited. He starts to imitate the action of feeding the animals. We were also introducing AAC at this time to this little guy. So you'll see them model on his AAC app.
Do they want to eat?
Eat.
Eat?
Eat.
What do they want to eat?
More.
They want to eat more.
Eat more, not straight.
He wants to eat more? Oh, give him some food. Where is he? Get him out. He wants to eat. Oh, yummy. He wants to eat. Put him back in the barn.
So I'm going to cut that for time's sake, but we were super excited that he started to do that. And think about even to the more language that we were able to expose him to, rather than just doing open and close, in and out, because that was his routine, right? So now we're naming animals, we're talking about eat. We also did activities or actions, with the animals where we would make them run and we would make them jump. And it just allowed us to expose him to more words and to teach that skill of imitation. So that was really, really a fun thing to do with him. Let's talk now about going a little bit beyond play and talking about how to encourage communication. And one of the things when thinking about communication and teaching communication, we have to consider how we're going to embed communication opportunities at home, right? So where do we create a communication opportunity? How do we even do it? And so these are a few strategies that we're going to discuss today that will allow you to create a communication opportunity for your child. And they're really simple. It's just thinking about things in a different way and manipulating your environment, your home environment, to embed those opportunities. So we're going to discuss asking open-ended questions, using expectant delay, establishing and interrupting routines, and manipulating that environment. So asking open-ended questions is very simple. We're not going to ask so many yes/no questions. Instead, you want to ask those open-ended WH questions because it will provide an opportunity for your child to communicate and to use language. So here's some examples. Instead of saying things like, do you want a cookie? You ask a general question like, what do you want to eat? Do you want to go to the park, or where do you want to go? Do you want to sit by dad, who do you want to sit by? So just switching that type of question can create so many more opportunities for your child to use language or to communicate. Even if they're not using words yet, you're then modeling for them, right? So when you ask, where do you want to go? You could give them a choice of, do you want to go to the park, or do you want to go to grandma's? I don't know, I'm making that up, but giving them choices and giving them those words that they can use to be able to answer the question. Expectant delay. I just wanted to chat about this. This is just a fancy name for just waiting, for not talking. And giving your child that opportunity to initiate the communication. I think it's really easy for us to overly cue and overly prompt our children with autism. And then they get used to it, right? And they don't initiate and they wait for you to ask them to do something before they do it. So we want to be aware of that. We want to, of course, make sure the child can do the skill we're wanting them to do before we use expectant delay, but then try to inhibit ourselves from asking them so many questions or prompting them with things like, tell me this, again, so that they're doing more of that initiation. So it's really simple to do it. You know, we're just going to approach your child. You're going to make an exaggerated facial expression and you're pausing and waiting for them to respond. I will tell you it's hard. It's definitely hard not to feel that silence. It's hard to stop cueing once you start doing it. So it's probably more of a challenge for us to do than it is for your child, actually. As we talked about routines with toys, routines with communication is also important. Routines help create some opportunities to get your child to use their words or to communicate. When the child goes through that sequence over and over again, they can become familiar with what words that they need to use and when they should use them. So to do this, you're going to start to think about, well, what are the daily activities that I do that I could start to embed a verbal routine in, and I can plan that out. I can plan out the words that I want to use, the phrases that I want to use, and then start to do that routine consistently with the child so that I'm walking through kind of like a verbal script, I guess, as you're doing that routine. And then when you do it a few times or several times, and you know that the child knows that verbal routine, you can start to pause during that routine to create an opportunity for the child to make a request or tell you something. So on this next slide, I gave you an example of like when you're making breakfast in the morning, let's say it's cereal is their favorite thing to eat in the morning. And so you're just talking through what you're doing. It's time for breakfast. Let's make a bowl of cereal. I need to get out the bowl and the spoon and the milk. Now let's choose your cereal you want. Do you want this or do you want that, right? So that you're giving them choices, and not, even though if you know Cocoa Puffs is their favorite cereal and they're always going to pick it, it's still a good idea to give them that choice because it allows for them to have a communication opportunity. So looking at the words that are in that orange or yellow color, if you start to pause after you've done the routine for a while, if you start to pause before you use those words, that again, the child knows what is expected and they can start to use that language to communicate during that situation. Our time is going by really fast today, so I'm going to keep moving along here. Manipulating the environment. So if your child always has access to everything they want, it really limits the opportunities for communication. And I understand, you know, letting your child have access to some things throughout the day. I think it's, you know, necessary to keep that flow going at home. But I would also consider not providing immediate access or making everything accessible to your child that they can get what they want all the time by themselves, right? So manipulating it so that they have to ask for it. So they have to use language or a gesture so that they're communicating you to indicate when they want something is really key, right? Because if we always give them access to everything, then we miss out on communication opportunities. So considering just manipulating your home environment a little bit by putting things up in cabinets where they can't reach it or containers that they can't open. So they have to ask for help. So they have to ask you for that item. Putting items up on a shelf, like their movies or their iPads or preferred toys. Again, not all the time, but maybe it's 1 or 2 things a day that you do that to embed that communication opportunity. Or maybe you're giving them only part of an activity, so they have to ask for the rest of it. Or giving them access to a few items at a time. So if you're doing blocks, you're not dumping out the whole thing. You're sitting down with them. You have the box of blocks. You're giving them a little bit at a time, but creating communication opportunities for them to ask for a block. So whether it's using the language to request block or to say a specific color, or tell you where they're going to put it. So some teaching strategies that you can use within your home, within these play activities, or even within daily routines, include modeling and recasting and using books and thinking about how to shape communication from behavior. So language modeling is so crucial for a child's development of language. It exposes them to the language that they should use in certain situations and settings. Exposes them not only to what words that they should use, but also when they should use it and how they should use the language. You're really just talking through what you're doing and what you're thinking. And if your child uses an AAC device, make sure that you're modeling on the device and not just using your verbal words, because their communication is through pictures. And so they need to have that model on their device. Consider and keep in mind that receptive or understanding of language comes before expressive. So when you're modeling, you're teaching them that receptive language piece. You're teaching them the meanings of those words, and you're teaching them when and how to use it. And I love this quote that, did you know the parents who just talk as they go about their daily activities expose their children to 1,000 to 2,000 words every hour? So get in the routine of modeling for your child and talking through things, exposing them to that language, and then start to embed those communication opportunities, just like we talked about prior to that. Recasting really is a simple strategy as well. So you're just rephrasing or expanding a child's utterance. So after they say one word, now you're going to add more words to it. So if they say more, you're modeling a higher level sentence. You want more milk. If they say want ball, you might add a descriptor like red. Go, you want to go outside. So again, you get the idea probably with those examples. If your child uses AAC, remember to recast on their device and use their picture symbols. As we've talked about toys, we haven't spent a lot of time talking about books yet. Books can be a great language teaching tool, provide such an enriching context to teach language and expose them to new words. And so books offer contextual learning opportunities to teach your child vocabulary, expose them to the rules of language, meaning how do they combine words and make sentences, and encourage the longer sentences, so expanding their utterances. Reading a book together also allows you to comment about a picture, so you're now reinforcing those comments, look and yuck and silly. You can model answering and asking questions, which is such an important skill to be able to relay information, and such an important pre-academic skill. And then relating book to other experiences, so things that they've done, providing that context about if the book is about, a child going to the park. Remember when you went to the park? You really liked that blue slide at the park, and kind of making those connections between experiences. You're going to use modeling again while you're reading to the child. You're going to model that new vocabulary. But the one thing that you definitely need to do is to increase their participation. The more the child can do things with that book and participate in the book, the more they're going to stay engaged. So pointing to things, matching to things, answering questions about the book. I love books with repetitive lines. They encourage the child to help you read the book, and it gets them involved, gives them some independence with books. So what kind of books? Definitely the interactive ones are going to be great to start with. The lift the flap, touch and feel, books with buttons and sounds, even manipulating your own books by putting some Velcro in there, and putting pictures, attaching with Velcro. Again, the books with repetitive lines. So that means they're saying the same line over and over again. So like for brown bear, what do you hear? That line is on every other page, right? So the child can easily start picking up on that and participating in that book. Books that are songs, books that have simple text and rhyming text, and using some of their preferred characters. So if they love, Coco Melon, if we can find a Coco Melon book just to get them engaged in that book, that would be great. And then I'm going to fly through the next few slides because we're almost out of time. But shaping behavior into communication, the child is always going to use behavior over communication if it's more efficient and more effective. And so we have to think about how we can shape that communication from behavior. So when your child is exhibiting a challenging behavior, think about why they're using it. Are they trying to tell me something? Are they trying to get out of it doing something? Are they trying to protest or get out of a situation? Are they telling me that they're hurt or uncomfortable? And figuring out that why can then help you figure out what words you need to model for them and encourage them to use during that situation. So once you've taught them those words, once you've modeled those words, we now have to really be patient and start to really encourage them to use those words if we know that they can do it instead of the behavior. And so you're going to have to start by only responding to them when they're using those words rather than behavior, which will take a lot of patience and persistence to be able to do that. So this was a really fast presentation. In summary, it's just, I want you to think about how important it is to teach play skills to your child with ASD. They need help and practice with how to play and what to do with toys. And I also want you to consider that the more that you can get them interested in beyond just some of those cause and effect toys, the more opportunities they're going to have to learn and to communicate. And that really thinking about how to set up your environment by intentionally providing some communication opportunities in your home is really crucial to also be teaching language and encouraging communication. And overall, you're your child's best teacher. You know them better than anyone else. And you need to keep in mind that that functional setting is so much better than a therapy room. So ask your teachers, ask your therapists for ideas and help on how to do this. So I just have a few minutes left if anybody has any questions. I'm in the Q&A right now and don't see any.
I don't see any either. Thank you so much. I'll give it a minute just in case someone wants to get one in real quick. Thank you so much for all your practical tips and things to consider about increasing those opportunities, things that we might not think of as offering different opportunities to help with that language development and communication and waiting and not trying to help. I think that's the hardest
Right.
so hard. Well, I don't think that there's any more questions. So we really appreciate your time, Trina, and sharing this information with us.
Thank you for having me. I hope the rest of the conference is great.